So imagine for a moment, if you will, trying to review a product centered around an organization that the players at your gaming table have almost completely destroyed in your campaign world. Today we're going to be talking about the Lost Omens Pathfinder Society Guide on this episode of the Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Mark and I am the Local Disaster Tour Guide. That's right, I'm a storyteller who thinks that the ideal way to organize any group of friends is around a shared interest in delving into dangerous ancient ruins full of traps and monsters. I'm sure this can't possibly go wrong. Welcome to my channel where we talk about role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today we're doing another The Local Disaster Tour Guide Reviews video. This week we're going to be talking about the Lost Omens Pathfinder Society Guide. This book goes into detail on the Pathfinder Society, which is a prominent organization inside the Galarian campaign setting for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. As you can tell, Paizo's game and organization share the same name, so it's obvious that this is a significant organization inside of their game world, and this book is a deep dive into the ideas, concepts, and history of one of the most significant parts of the Galarian campaign setting. So today we're going to talk about this book, we're going to talk about its strengths, about its weaknesses, and I'm going to do my best to give you an idea of if this product is something that might be a good fit for your gaming table. A quick overview on this product. It has an MSRP of $34.99. It is a hardback book with approximately 127 pages, including the glossary. And it is broken into 4 distinct chapters. An introduction, which mostly serves as a history of the Pathfinder Society, and then a chapter on Pathfinder Society factions, a chapter on Pathfinder Society lodges, and a chapter on Pathfinder Society character options. So is this book something that your table may enjoy, and something that your table may be interested in purchasing? Well, let's find out. Now, before we dive into the review itself, let me go ahead and give you my usual grain of salt. I am some random guy on the internet, and this is just my opinion. The best review that you can ever have for a product is to check the product out for yourself. So if you can borrow this book or check it out at a local gaming store, I always recommend trying to get a hands-on look at a product for yourself before making a purchase decision if possible. So let's get going. The Pathfinder Society Guide is a little bit of a strange product for me because this product is probably a little less useful at my gaming table than it may be for other people playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I use the Galarian campaign setting. I actually really enjoy the Galarian campaign setting. But over the course of about 2 campaigns, my players managed to almost completely destroy the Pathfinder Society. I won't get into all of the shenanigans that occurred, but let's just say that the Church of Norgorber almost completely eradicated the Pathfinder Society before my players decided that maybe they needed to intervene. So, in my campaign world, the Pathfinder Society is a fractured organization that is struggling to rebuild, and probably is not exactly represented by what's available in this book. But as I imagine my table and my campaign world where the Pathfinder Society might go, there's definitely a lot of inspiration I can use here. And for other players who are using the Galarian campaign setting, I imagine that this book is going to be a fantastic deep dive that may be very useful at your gaming table. If you've seen any of my other reviews, you know that I like to begin at the end to give you my overall thoughts on the product, and then go through the product so that you can see how I came to those conclusions. So, what are my overall thoughts for the Pathfinder Society Guide? Well, I give Lost Omens, the Pathfinder Society Guide, a B+. And if you have seen some of my other reviews on this particular series, you know that that is the best grade that I have given any book in the Lost Omens series. In fact, the Pathfinder Society Guide is my pick for the best Lost Omens book. I think this is hands down the best work that Paizo has done. However, we'll get into this, I do not think it is the most useful book. The most useful book from the Lost Omens series is still probably Gods and Magic, and Gods and Magic is still the only book I would recommend as a standalone purchase from this series. But in terms of actual quality, this book has definitely raised the bar of what the Lost Omens series can be. So, why have I given this book such a high grade compared to others in the series? Well, let's talk about the strengths of this book. The number one strength of this book is it is a well-focused book. Other books in this series have been spread over too wide of a topic. The Lost Omens World Guide tried to cover 10 different regions in a similar page count, and it just didn't have the focus that it needed. Lost Omens Pathfinder Society Guide picks one topic, the Pathfinder Society, and focuses in on the society in depth in an intelligent and engaging way. The focus of this book is an incredible strength and really makes this product a standout in the Lost Omens series. In fact, Paizo, if you're seeing this video, it is my hope that future Lost Omens books follow this focused format. Pick one topic, one region, one organization, one thing inside your setting, and give us a deep dive into that particular topic. Spreading yourself too thin has not worked in the past. This book is well focused and it makes it a standout product. The second strength that this book has is it has a lot of player-focused content. If you are a player interested in making a Pathfinder Society character, there are a ton of options here. There is mundane gear, there is magical gear, there is, of course, a ton of stuff for wayfinders if you know that part of the lore. There are skill feats, class feats, archetype feats. There are options upon options for Pathfinder Society characters, and if you're a player, there is a lot to sink your teeth into here. And the final strength that I want to give this book is there is an incredible integration of the lore of the campaign world with the mechanics that are offered in this book. It's not just a random collection of feats and gear, but every mechanical option presented in this book is tied to the Pathfinder Society in very flavorful ways that feel appropriate to the campaign setting. This book has some of the best flavor to mechanics construction that I have seen in a role-playing product, and it really causes it to be a standout product for me. Still, this book is not perfect. There are some issues with it, and I do want to talk about those really quick. The first weakness of Lost Omens Pathfinder Society Guide is really a criticism of the Lost Omens series as a whole, which is multiple book dependency. Paizo has a bad habit with this series of putting some of the information for an archetype or other element of the game in one book, and some of the information for the same archetype or element in a completely different book, and that pattern continues here. We'll talk about where some of that is, but some of the content in this book, if you want to use it, you have to have access to other books to even be able to use some of the content in this book. I realize we live in the age of the internet. There are multiple ways to access information, so it's not an insurmountable hurdle, but it is still something that just bothers me. The second weakness of this book is honestly a common criticism of Paizo at this point: erratic organization. So this book, depending on who you are, is either going to be well organized or headache inducing. If you are a DM, if you are a storyteller, this book has been organized for you. The layout of the information, the way things are presented, wonderful. You are going to love everything about this book and how they present the information. You won't have a single complaint. But earlier I mentioned that there is a ton of player-focused content in this book, and if you are a player trying to find the content you need for your character, you may get a bit of a headache because it's scattered. Some of the content is going to be in the factions section, some of the content is going to be in the lodges section, some of the content is going to be in the options section, which you would think is where all of the content should be. They have scattered things out so that mechanical options are presented next to the in-world flavor elements that would provide that option. This means that if you're looking for two pieces of gear, they're not going to be next to each other in the book. They very well could be in two very different sections. So if you're a player trying to use this book, the erratic organization can be a little bit frustrating. The final weakness of this book, and this is mostly as a purchase consideration, this book is laser focused on the Pathfinder Society, which means that its ultimate strength is also its ultimate weakness. If you don't plan to use the Pathfinder Society in your games, a lot of this book isn't going to be useful for you. Now, me personally, I appreciate the laser focus. I think it is a wonderful facet of this book, but admittedly, it brings down the ultimate utility of Lost Omens Pathfinder Society Guide. You really have to ask yourself, am I going to use the Pathfinder Society in-game? And if not, this may not be the book for you. Still, overall, Pathfinder Society Guide is a very strong product and something I really enjoy. So I do feel it has raised the overall value of the Lost Omens line in general. As I've said in other videos, Lost Omens is a series that's kind of an all or none series, Gods and Magic withstanding. If you are interested in one book, you really kind of have to ask yourself, am I interested in all of the books? And thankfully, I feel like the Pathfinder Society Guide here has raised the quality. It has brought up the series as a whole and made the series something I am much happier to have invested in. So let's dive into the chapters and talk about what you can expect to find. Now, one thing I want to say about this book is the quality of the artwork in this book is excellent. I've been trying to do a better job of being appreciative of artwork in role-playing games, and Paizo has done a good job with this book. One of the things I really like is each chapter has a 2-page artwork spread that serves as an introduction to the chapter. I really like these spreads. This is my favorite spread from Chapter 3, the Pathfinder Society Lodges. But let me just say, the 2-page spread artwork and the different smaller pieces inside this book are all something that I really enjoy and all something I'm really happy was included. But on a more serious note, what information can you expect to find inside? Well, I will tell you this. As you move through this book, it's going to kind of shift focus. Chapter 1 is very heavily focused on information that a DM or storyteller is going to use. Chapters 2 and 3 are still more focused towards the DM, but begin to include player character content. And then Chapter 4 is almost exclusively player character content, but done in a way that there are still going to be story hooks that a DM or storyteller can use. So as you move through this book, you can kind of expect at the start it's kind of a storyteller product, and towards the end it is more of a player-focused product. Chapter 1 is the introduction to the Pathfinder Society, and basically it's a history book. That's what you can expect here. It's going to tell you how the Pathfinder Society came to be, who some of its influential members have been in the past, and it's also going to kind of give you an idea of the themes and storytelling elements that are common for the Pathfinder Society. This is very much a DM chapter. Players may enjoy reading it, but storytellers are going to be the ones who really pull valuable pieces of information from this chapter. There is no player character focused content here. It is a history book, but there are definitely engaging story ideas. Chapter 2 is where you begin to focus into more usable specifics. and it's going to introduce the Pathfinder Society factions. Now, from Pathfinder 1st Edition to 2nd Edition, they have really changed how the factions have been done. I tried to shoot this video earlier and it went way too long, mostly because I talked about factions too much, so let me give you the quick version. In Pathfinder 1st Edition, there were like 10 major factions. Now there are 3 major factions and a pseudo-major faction. They have really narrowed the focus of what major factions inside the Pathfinder Society should be, and that to me makes Pathfinder Society so much more accessible. In 1st Edition, I didn't use Pathfinder Society much, mostly because it was just too many layers of political intrigue. This is much simpler, it's much more understandable, and in my opinion, it's much better. The Pathfinder Society's motto is explore, report, and cooperate. And those 3 words are the 3 major factions that you need to know. Explore is a reference to the Horizon Hunters, report is a reference to the Grand Archive, and cooperate is a reference to the Envoys Alliance. These are your 3 major factions in the Pathfinder Society, each with some corresponding player character mechanical elements, and it is much more understandable. There's also a 4th pseudo-major faction, which I basically call the cleanup crew. It's the group that comes in and fixes all of the problems caused when the other 3 factions accidentally unleash the ancient curse. That's kind of its own group. But this is a much more accessible organization and a much more usable organization in terms of in actual play, at least in my opinion. So you have those major factions. You also have some details on some minor factions that exist inside the organization, mostly as kind of ideas or inspiration for other minor factions you may want to use at your gaming table. And then there are Pathfinder Society training options, I guess you would call them. You may remember this from 1st Edition. You could have training as a scroll, a spell, or a sword under the Pathfinder Society. Well, now you have archetypes for the Scroll Master, Spell Master, and Sword Master, representing specialized training available to Pathfinder Society characters. There's also a 4th archetype that I guess is a little more of a generalist, which is the Pathfinder Agent archetype. These archetypes are fantastic. There are tons of options. In fact, there are so many options you could not use an entire archetype on a single character. You would have to break it up over multiple characters. They have given you a ton of options here. I love these archetypes, but this is where one of my complaints of the book really takes center stage. The Pathfinder Agent archetype was introduced in Lost Omens World Guide, and the other 3 archetypes, Scrollmaster, Spellmaster, and Swordmaster, were introduced in the Character Guide, which means the full archetypes are not printed in this book. If you want to use these archetypes, you have to have other books or other ways to access the information, or you essentially have several pages of information that you can't use at your gaming table. This is where the interbook or multi-book dependency of the Lost Omens series comes back to bite it, and it really detracts from this book, in my opinion. This section of Chapter 2 is unusable if you don't have access to the other books. And so that is something you need to consider when you're looking at this book. But if you have the other books, these are fun archetypes. In fact, my favorite thing from this section is the Spellmaster Feat/Focus spell, Familiar Form. The Pathfinder Society is an organization that likes to gather new and interesting information, sometimes in clandestine means. The Familiar Form spell is a simple yet remarkably effective way to do exactly that. Next up is Chapter 3, which is Pathfinder Society Lodges, and in my opinion, this is the best chapter in the book. Now, I'm coming at this as a storyteller, but I love the Pathfinder Society Lodges. It gives you an idea of the locations associated with the Pathfinder Society. You have the Grand Lodge in Absalom, as well as 10 regional lodges, and then shorter descriptions of 12 minor lodges associated with the Pathfinder Society, and all of the regional lodges come with some mechanical player character focused benefits that you can include in your game. All of this information is fantastic. There were so many story seeds to be found here that honestly, I could spend way too much time talking about this. This is just a fantastic chapter. The Lodges chapter is a gold mine of potential stories. My favorite from this chapter has to be the Grinning Pixie Pathfinder Lodge. The Grinning Pixie is less of a lodge and more of a ship sailing around from adventure site to adventure site to adventure site. This is hands down my favorite Pathfinder Society lodge, and even though in my game world the Pathfinder Society has been wrecked and is trying to rebuild, I really think the Grinning Pixie is going to be showing up in some of my future games, because that is just one of the most interesting concepts I have seen for a home base that your player characters can use. Chapter 3, the Pathfinder Society Lodges, really is one of the best parts of this book. However, Chapter 4 is probably the chapter that's going to see the most use at your gaming table, which is the Pathfinder Society Options. And this is what you think it is. It's a lot of options for your player characters to use. Gear, both mundane and magical, especially Wayfinder options. If you know the lore, you know why that's significant. You also see a lot of feats. There are a lot of new familiar options. There's just a lot of different things that players of Pathfinder Society characters can use to build out their character sheet to represent what they're doing in world. Now, let me just say on this chapter, Paizo did something very intelligent here, and that is, this isn't just mechanical options, the chapter. Everything in this chapter is tied to the in-game flavor and lore in interesting ways. They have done a good job of making sure that the mechanical choices you make for your character reflect real in-world things. And that to me is brilliant. This could have been a very cut and dry chapter. It really could have been a chapter that I just kind of gloss over as a DM. Yeah, here's your options. But there are actually story hooks that storytellers can use in this chapter. One of the things they did is they introduced the idea of instructors. Pathfinder Society members who can teach your players special feats, special skill feats or class feats, that kind of thing. And that to me is fantastic. These aren't just cut and dry options, but they represent real setting flavor, and that is just so beautifully done. It really raises the bar on what this chapter is and leaves it as a very strong inclusion in this book. Now, there is a lot that is included in the Pathfinder Society options, but I'm going to go ahead and say that my favorite thing from this chapter is the Perilous Larceny feats. Mostly because Gambit is my favorite X-Men, and these feats let me pretend to be Gambit if I get to play that character. So maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I just absolutely love the Perilous Larceny feats, and if you get a chance to read them, you will understand why too. But overall, the flavor to mechanic, just construction of this chapter is extremely well done and something I enjoy to a very high degree. So that's it. That's the Lost Omens Pathfinder Society Guide. This is a very strong book. It does have its issues, but it is something that I enjoy, and I definitely plan on at least adapting to my campaign world, and I can see it being useful at other gaming tables as well. This is probably a storyteller product over a player product, but if you're a storyteller who wants to use the Golarion campaign setting, there are definitely going to be some interesting things you can offer your characters, and I think this is a book you will enjoy adding to your collection. But it's time to turn the conversation over to you. What are your thoughts on the Lost Omens Pathfinder Society Guide? Do you agree with my review? Is there a strength that you feel I missed, or a weakness that you feel I left out? Is there an element that is included in this book that you think I glossed over that definitely needed a shout out? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, like it and share it. Subscribe to my channel. We have more content coming out. And thank you for being a part of the conversation. I hope you have a wonderful day.